The flight attendant smiled. "Miss Brooks, we've been expecting you." Naomi froze. Expecting her? She was supposed to be on a budget flight to Miami, not stepping onto a jet so sleek it looked stolen from a Billionaire's movie. The door sealed shut with a hiss. A man turned from the window, his eyes sharp, predatory. "You're not who I was expecting," he said. Her chest tightened. Who was he? Where was this jet going? Then his lips curved into a smile that wasn't reassuring, it was dangerous. "Dubai." And when he leaned in, his whisper made her blood run cold. "Tell me, Naomi, was this really a mistake?" Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I'll be giving you another story just as wild as this one. Now back to our story. But hours earlier, Naomi thought she was only rushing to catch a cheap flight to Miami with her best friend. Naomi opened her mouth to question this, but another attendant interrupted. "You can board now. Mr. Voss is already aboard." "Wait, Mr. Who?" Before Naomi could piece together what was happening, she was being guided toward an aircraft that looked like it belonged in a Billionaire's movie. Sleek black exterior, no airline logo, just pure luxury. "This has to be a mistake," Naomi finally said. "I'm going to Miami." The attendant smiled knowingly. "Don't worry, Ms. Brooks. Mr. Voss mentioned you might be running late. He's very understanding." The interior made Naomi's jaw literally drop. Cream leather seats that probably cost more than her yearly nursing salary. Wood paneling that screamed old money. A full bar stocked with bottles she'd never heard of. This wasn't economy class to Miami. This was wealth Naomi had only seen on TV. A man sat facing the window, his back to her. When the door sealed behind Naomi with a pressurized hiss, he turned around. Now, normally we'd panic, but something about this moment felt different. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s. His suit screamed money she'd never see in her lifetime. Silver watch that probably cost her entire savings account. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard, startled curiosity mixed with something else she couldn't name. What would you have done in Naomi's shoes right then? "You're not who I was expecting," he said simply, his voice low and calm. "I'm Naomi Brooks," she replied, gripping her phone tight. "And I think I just got on the wrong plane." The man's expression shifted, from surprise to something dangerously close to amusement. A smile that probably melted hearts and earned millions. Apparently so. The jet engines roared to life beneath them, and here's where it gets wild. Panic surged through Naomi's chest. "I need to get off right now. I'm supposed to be going to Miami with my friend." "I'm afraid we're already cleared for takeoff," he said, nodding toward the window where ground crew was retreating from the aircraft. "I'm Lucas Voss, by the way." "Where is this plane going?" Naomi demanded, sinking into the seat across from him. "Dubai." "Dubai? As in half a world away Dubai?" Naomi's stomach dropped. "Dubai as in the United Arab Emirates?" Lucas nodded, watching her face carefully. "You really did get on the wrong plane, didn't you?" Naomi stared at him, her exhausted brain trying to process this unreal situation. She glanced down at her phone. Sarah was probably at the gate wondering where she was. But here's the thing that shocked me most. Naomi didn't panic. "The staff obviously mistook you for someone else," Lucas explained calmly. "I was expecting a business colleague. It seems we both got quite the surprise." The reality crashed over Naomi like ice water. She was trapped on a private jet to Dubai with Lucas Voss, the real estate mogul whose building projects shaped skylines across continents. The man whose net worth made headlines. The billionaire whose empire Naomi had read about but never dreamed of meeting. Subscribe because what happens next will blow your mind. "I don't even have," Naomi stopped herself. She glanced at her backpack. She did have a passport, buried from when she dreamed of traveling after nursing school, before life had other plans. "Do you have a passport?" Lucas asked. Naomi nodded slowly. "Yeah. But this is insane. I need to call Sarah. I need to figure out how to get home. I need to." "Breathe," Lucas finished for her, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "Drink this first." He handed her a crystal glass of water she hadn't seen appear. His fingers brushed hers as he passed the glass, and something electric passed between them. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she took it. The water tasted like impossibilities and new beginnings. But here's where it gets controversial. Across from her, Lucas Voss watched with the expression of a man who just discovered something he never knew he was looking for. Something dangerous. Something that could change everything. What do you think Lucas is really thinking? We always tell ourselves money can't buy happiness, but what if we're wrong about what happiness really looks like? The plane climbed higher, and Naomi could feel the pressure building, not just the altitude change, but something else entirely. She gripped her phone tighter, staring at the screen where Sarah's texts were now turning into missed calls. Lucas watched her with quiet amusement. You look like you're about to launch my jet into outer space through sheer force of will. I should be explaining to my best friend why I'm not in Miami, Naomi snapped, finally finding her voice through the panic. Not sitting across from someone who thinks this is funny. Your best friend is probably boarding the Miami flight right now wondering where you are, Lucas said, settling back into his seat. While you're headed toward a destination most people dream about visiting. Subscribe if you want to see how Naomi handles this luxury nightmare. Dream about. Naomi laughed, but it came out hollow. Mr. Voss, I'm a nurse from Atlanta who hasn't vacationed in 3 years. Dubai isn't a dream, it's a mistake I can't fix. But here's what Naomi wasn't seeing yet. Lucas's expression had shifted. That amusement was fading into something else entirely. Call me Lucas, he said quietly. And Naomi, how good are you at hacking? I'm sorry, what? Naomi's eyebrows shot up. You clearly hacked your way into my private jet security, Lucas deadpanned. Which, I'll admit, is impressive. My team cost me millions, and you walked right through it. The tension broke. Naomi actually laughed, a real laugh that caught her off guard. Are you seriously making jokes right now? Why not? Lucas shrugged. We're stuck in this airborne predicament together. Might as well find some humor in it. Comment below, would you try to see the humor in this situation? Naomi shook her head, but she was studying him differently now. Most men in his position would be furious, demanding control, throwing their weight around. But Lucas just was there. Present. Curious about her instead of angry about the inconvenience. This is where it gets interesting. How long is this flight? Naomi asked, leaning forward despite herself. 11 hours, Lucas said. Plenty of time for me to convince you that this might not be the disaster you think it is. 11 hours. Naomi's stomach dropped again, but for a different reason now. 11 hours alone with a man who looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing he'd encountered all year. I need to call Destiny, Naomi said suddenly, pulling her phone up. My sister, she'll worry if she can't reach me. Lucas nodded, gesturing around the cabin. Feel free. These aren't exactly commercial airlines. No phones off rule here. But here's the thing, when Naomi dialed Destiny's number, her fingers trembled slightly. Not from panic this time. From something else she couldn't quite name. The call picked up on the first ring. Naomi. Destiny's young voice was instantly alert. Is everything okay? No, nothing is okay, Naomi blurted out. I got on the wrong plane, and now I'm flying to Dubai with some billionaire, and this whole thing is insane. Wait, back up, Dubai? Like the Dubai? Yes, the Dubai. Naomi caught Lucas watching her phone conversation with polite interest. With Lucas Voss. There was silence on the other end. Then, as in the Lucas Voss. The guy whose buildings are all over architectural magazines. He's sitting right across from me, Naomi whispered, turning her body slightly away from Lucas. And he's acting like this is normal. Sis, Destiny's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Maybe this is your sign. What? Naomi's voice rose. You've been carrying everything for so long, Destiny continued. Working yourself to death, taking care of everyone else. Maybe the universe is finally giving you something. Naomi's eyes darted to Lucas, who was pretending not to eavesdrop but clearly was. Destiny, this isn't some romantic comedy. I'm trapped on a plane with a complete stranger. A stranger who thinks you're fascinating, Destiny corrected. Destiny. Sis, you deserve something good. Maybe this is it. When Naomi ended the call and turned back to Lucas, she found him studying her with genuine curiosity. "Your sister sounds wise," he offered. "She's 17 and thinks she knows everything," Naomi said, but there was affection in her voice. 17. Lucas's expression shifted. "You're raising her alone?" Subscribe because this conversation is about to reveal some deep truths. Naomi hesitated. She'd built walls around her personal life for so long. But sitting in this impossible situation, something about Lucas made her want to be honest. "My mom died 2 years ago," she said quietly. "So yes, just us two." "And you're 26, Lucas said gently. "That's a lot of responsibility for someone so young." Something cracked in Naomi's chest. Nobody had spoken to her like that in years, like she was someone worth caring about, not just someone who could handle whatever got thrown at her. "It feels like I've been carrying the world," she admitted, the words coming without permission. "Double shifts at the hospital, making sure Destiny's college fund doesn't run dry, keeping our mom's promise that she'd be okay." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What's it like? Nursing?" Naomi looked up, surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. "It's complicated. Some days I love it, when I can actually help, when I get to see someone walk out of the hospital healthy. Other days—" She paused, her voice catching slightly. "Other days I watch people die, and I have to clean up their rooms like they were never even there." The raw honesty of it hung between them like smoke. "That sounds unbearably heavy," Lucas said quietly. "It is," Naomi said simply. "But someone has to do it." "What about you?" Naomi found herself asking, despite her resolve to keep this interaction surface level. "What's everyone's work life look like?" But here's where Lucas surprised her again. He looked away, out the window at nothing, and his entire demeanor shifted. "Lonely," he said finally. Just one word, but it carried everything. "Most people see the buildings, the money, the lifestyle," Lucas continued slowly. "They don't see that I spend 16 hours a day in meetings, surrounded by people who want something from me. People who see the empire, not the person." Naomi watched him carefully now. Something vulnerable had crept into his voice that she hadn't expected. "What made you want to build empires?" she asked. "I didn't," Lucas said, turning back to her. "I was supposed to be an architect. I wanted to design buildings that made people's lives better. Instead, I build skyscrapers that mostly empty most of the time because the people who can afford them travel half the year." The contrast was striking, him in his expensive suit describing emptiness, her in her worn clothes describing meaning. "You sound disappointed," Naomi observed. "I am," Lucas admitted. "But I'm too far down this path to change now. Too many people depend on me to walk away." "Have you ever felt trapped by your own success?" They looked at each other across the cabin, separated by worlds of difference but recognizing something familiar. Both carrying burdens nobody else could see. Then something happened Naomi would never admit to later. Their eyes met, and for just a second, she forgot about everything. The wrong plane, the impossibility of their circumstances, her responsibilities waiting back home. Lucas's gaze was curious and warm and something else entirely, attraction, undeniable. But when Naomi felt herself leaning forward slightly, ready to say something, anything, the plane hit turbulence. The moment shattered. Naomi grabbed her armrests instinctively as the jet bucked and swayed. Lucas reached across the space between them, his hand landing on her wrist. "Easy," he said, his grip steady and reassuring. "Just turbulence. You're safe." And as their skin touched in that moment of chaos, Naomi felt something crack through her entire system. Electricity and warmth and something dangerously close to hope. We always tell ourselves that lightning can't strike twice in the same place. But what if this time, destiny got the coordinates right? We always tell ourselves that lightning can't strike twice in the same place. But what if this time, destiny got the coordinates right? The turbulence passed again, but something had shifted between them. Naomi pulled her wrist away slowly, the skin where Lucas's fingers had been still tingling. 11 hours of conversation, vulnerability, and something dangerously close to hope had created a connection Naomi hadn't expected. And now the plane was descending. "We're landing," Lucas said quietly, peering out his window. Naomi leaned forward, pressing her face against the plastic oval beside her seat. Below them stretched an impossible cityscape, Towers that pierced clouds like needles, sleek buildings that gleamed in the desert sun, highways that curved like ribbons around artificial islands shaped like palms. "This can't be real," Naomi breathed. "That's Dubai," Lucas said with a smile in his voice. But nothing could have prepared Naomi for what hit her the moment they stepped into the jet bridge. Heat. Not the gentle warmth of Atlanta summers, but a dry, clinging heat that seemed to penetrate everything. Naomi gasped as the air rushed into her lungs, different from anything she'd breathed before, hot and foreign and somehow alive with possibility. "We need to get you out of those clothes," Lucas said immediately, and Naomi's face flushed until she caught the concern in his expression, not desire. "You'll burn in that," he clarified, nodding toward her jeans and long-sleeved shirt. Temperatures here hit 115 degrees Fahrenheit regularly. As they cleared customs, thank God Naomi really did have that passport, they stepped into the arrivals hall of Dubai International Airport, and Naomi's senses went into overload. The ceiling stretched impossibly high above them. Light streamed through vast windows that caught every reflection, making everything sparkle. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with polished marble and something floral she couldn't identify. Around them, people moved in a steady stream, some in traditional white robes and headscarves, others in designer clothes that probably cost Naomi's monthly salary. Subscribe to see how Naomi handles this sensory overload. Lucas walked confidently through the chaos, Naomi trailing behind him like a bewildered shadow. When they reached the curb, she watched as men in crisp uniforms appeared from nowhere, loading their luggage into cars that looked like they'd been designed in a laboratory. "Where are we going?" Naomi asked as Lucas held open a door that gleamed like liquid silver. "Home," he said simply. "My penthouse." The drive was like touring a city designed by people who'd never seen anything mundane. Mile after mile of impossibly tall buildings, each more spectacular than the last. The famous Burj Khalifa loomed in the distance, its needle-like spire reaching up toward heavens Naomi could barely comprehend were the same ones she saw from her tiny Atlanta apartment. "Have you ever visited a city that felt completely alien to your world?" "Naomi, breathe," Lucas said gently, noticing her white-knuckled grip on the leather seat beside her. "This doesn't feel like planet Earth," she whispered. Lucas laughed softly. "That's because it isn't." "Not really. Dubai exists in its own reality." That reality became even more surreal when the car pulled up to a building that made Naomi's mouth drop open. The lobby soared above them like a cathedral dedicated to wealth. Marble floors stretched endlessly in every direction. A waterfall created a curtain of water behind a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a palace. "This is not a building," Naomi said weakly. It was a statement, not a question. The elevator ride to Lucas's penthouse felt like flying through clouds. When the doors opened, Naomi stepped into sunlight so bright she had to shield her eyes. The penthouse sprawled before them like something from a magazine Naomi had never been able to afford. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Dubai stretched out below them like a glittering carpet. The Burj Khalifa dominated the skyline like a ruler overlooking its kingdom. "I know it's overwhelming," Lucas said quietly, watching Naomi take it all in. Naomi turned slowly in the center of the room, her eyes wide. She wasn't seduced by luxury, her shoulders stayed tense, her guard firmly up. But she was honest enough to acknowledge the magnificence. "This place probably costs more than I'll earn in my entire lifetime," she said finally. "Maybe," Lucas acknowledged. "But Naomi, look around. Do you see anyone else here?" Naomi glanced around the vast space. He was right, there was nobody. No staff, no friends, no family. Just incredible emptiness dressed up as success. "What makes a home a home?" Lucas asked quietly. Naomi looked at him sharply. "Agency. Safety. People who care about you. And how many of those things do you think I have?" The question hung between them like smoke. For the first time since she'd met him, Naomi saw something she recognized beneath the designer clothes and billionaire lifestyle: genuine loneliness. They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by luxury Naomi had never imagined, yet somehow feeling the emptiness Lucas had been hiding. But then something unexpected happened. "I'm hungry," Naomi announced. "And I don't mean expensive restaurant hungry. I mean real food hungry." Lucas's face brightened instantly. "I know just the place." 20 minutes later, Naomi found herself in a tiny cafe tucked between modern glass buildings. The walls were painted a faded yellow that reminded her of southern sunshine. An elderly man with kind eyes served them steaming cups of traditional Arabic coffee and flatbread warm from the oven. "This," Naomi said, inhaling the scent of spices and coffee, "this feels real." Lucas watched her with quiet fascination as she tore into the bread with her hands. "Most people want to see the luxury Dubai," he observed. "I'm not most people," Naomi replied firmly. But here's where Naomi saw Lucas in a completely new light. As the owner of the cafe, Abdullah, brought more food, Lucas spoke to the man in fluent Arabic. Not the practiced speech of someone showing off, but easy, warm conversation that made the elderly man laugh. "You speak Arabic?" Naomi asked as Abdullah retreated back behind his counter. "My grandmother was Lebanese," Lucas explained. "She insisted I learn Arabic before English. Said I needed to know where our family came from before I decided where it was going." The casual admission changed everything Naomi had assumed about him. This wasn't just another billionaire playing tourist. This was someone with roots deeper than money. "What was your grandmother like?" Naomi found herself asking. "Fierce," Lucas smiled, his eyes going soft. "She stood 4'10" and could shut down a room of executives with one look. Said money without principles was just elaborate theft." Naomi looked at him sharply. "She sounds incredible." "She was," Lucas admitted quietly. "She died before I became this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing his entire lifestyle. "What do you think she'd think of all of this?" Naomi gestured back at the gleaming city outside the cafe window. "She'd probably tell me I'm working too hard and forgetting to live," Lucas said with a laugh that sounded genuine. "Subscribe because this quiet conversation is about to reveal something unexpected." As they finished their meal, Naomi realized she was watching Lucas differently now. Not as the billionaire trapped in luxury, but as a man who remembered what simple pleasures felt like. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked quietly. "Because you deserve to see Dubai," Lucas replied simply. "The real Dubai, not just the postcard version." "And what about after Dubai?" Naomi's voice was steady despite the sudden flutter in her chest. "Where do I fit into this?" Lucas was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the afternoon light filtering through the cafe window. "Maybe it could be our world," he said finally. Naomi's breath caught. "Our world?" "Naomi, this isn't my world either," Lucas admitted quietly. "Not really. I built an empire thinking it would fill something inside me. Instead, it just created bigger walls." "And you think I'd fit behind those walls?" Naomi's voice was sharper than she intended. "I think," Lucas said carefully, "that maybe you're someone who could help me tear them down." The vulnerability in his voice was more dangerous than any luxury could ever be. Because it was real. But Naomi's hard-won survival instincts kicked in. She pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. "This isn't my world," she insisted firmly. "I'm a nurse from Atlanta who accidentally got on the wrong plane. That's it. That's all this is." "Just an accident?" Lucas asked quietly. "Yes," Naomi said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. "Just a mistake." But as she said the words, she could feel Destiny's voice echoing in her head from their phone conversation hours ago. "Maybe this is your sign. You deserve so much more." Naomi realized that perhaps the most terrifying thing about Dubai wasn't its glittering towers or impossible wealth. It was the way being there made her question everything she'd always believed about what she deserved. Have you ever been somewhere so different that it made you question your own life choices? Tomorrow she'd tour the famous souks, ride camels in the desert, see gold that defied imagination. But tonight, Naomi lay awake in a guest bedroom larger than her entire Atlanta apartment, listening to the sounds of a city that never slept, wondering what would happen if she stopped insisting that dreams were accidents. And in the bedroom next to hers, Lucas lay awake too, staring at a ceiling almost as high as the skyline outside his window, wondering for the first time in years what it might feel like to not be alone. Naomi lay awake in a guest bedroom larger than her entire Atlanta apartment, listening to the sounds of a city that never slept, wondering what would happen if she stopped insisting that dreams were accidents. The terrace called to her. She'd noticed it earlier, a private balcony that overlooked Dubai's skyline like a throne suspended in the night sky. When the penthouse had grown too quiet, too luxurious, too much like a gilded cage, Naomi slipped from her room in bare feet and padded toward the sliding glass doors. The city spread before her like a constellation fallen to earth. Every building glittered with life, lights that never dimmed, skyscrapers that reached towards stars Naomi could barely see through the ambient glow. She wasn't surprised to find Lucas already there. He stood with his back to her, silhouetted against darkness that wasn't really dark. When he heard her footsteps on the tile, he didn't turn around immediately. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked quietly. "The strangest thing about wealth," Naomi observed, "is how empty it feels." Lucas finally turned to face her. In the dim terrace lighting, he looked younger than he had in the sharp brightness of Dubai's sun. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with hours and everything to do with years. "My father was the richest man you've never heard of," he said abruptly. The admission startled Naomi. Lucas had been politely evasive about his family all day, deflecting questions about his empire's origins with practiced diplomacy. Tonight, something had cracked open. "What do you mean?" Lucas moved to lean against the railing beside her, close enough that Naomi could smell his cologne mixed with something earthier, coffee and spices from their cafe dinner. "He built shipping containers," Lucas explained quietly. "Started with 3 boats in Marseilles. 30 years later, his company controlled 70% of Mediterranean trade routes. But here's the thing, Naomi, every penny came from exploitation." Naomi leaned against the railing beside him, careful not to touch, though the space between them felt charged with electricity. "What kind of exploitation?" "The kind that killed people." Lucas's voice went flat. "Sailors working 20-hour shifts in dangerous conditions. Dock workers paid barely enough to survive. Environmental destruction they called progress." "And my father? He got rich while families starved." Naomi watched him carefully. "You were a kid when this happened." "I was," Lucas nodded. "But Naomi, when you're the heir apparent, you don't get to be innocent. You learn the family business young, or you lose everything. Subscribe because this confession is about to reveal something devastating." "And what did you lose?" Naomi asked softly. Lucas's jaw tightened. "My grandmother died when I was 19. Heart attack from stress, the doctors said. But I knew she died from watching her empire become a machine that destroyed everything she built it to serve. The day she died, my father called to tell me I was being sent to New York to expand operations." Naomi's chest ached for reasons she couldn't pinpoint. "I went," Lucas continued quietly. "Built skyscrapers instead of managing shipping routes. Thought maybe I could create something different. But Naomi, do you know what I realized? I'm not building homes for families. I'm building monuments to wealth that only the wealthiest can afford." The bitterness in his voice was so raw Naomi could taste it. "How do you live with that?" she asked quietly. "I don't," Lucas admitted. "Not really. Every building I design, every single luxury penthouse, every hotel suite, reminds me that I'm perpetuating the cycle my grandmother died trying to stop." But here's where Naomi's own walls started crumbling. "At least you get to choose how to spend your wealth," she said quietly. "At least people don't wonder if you're worthy of breathing the same air they do." Lucas looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Naomi wasn't planning to confess this. She hadn't talked about it in years, not even with Destiny, though her sister probably sensed it anyway. "There are days," Naomi said, her voice barely above a whisper, "when I finish a 12-hour shift at the hospital and I sit in my car outside our apartment building, and I can't make myself get out. Because inside, Destiny is waiting for dinner I can't afford to make spectacular. Inside, there are bills stacked on our kitchen table that I can't pay without working another shift tomorrow. Inside, there's a 17-year-old who deserves music lessons and decent clothes and the chance to be a teenager instead of worrying about whether we can afford tampons." The words poured out like poison she'd been carrying for years. "People look at me and see someone who chose to be a nurse. They don't see someone trapped by a promise she made to a dying woman. They don't see someone who's been the adult since she was 24. They don't see someone who's never been allowed to be fragile or scared or tired." Lucas was silent for a long moment, studying her face in the city's glow. "You resent her," he said finally. "Sometimes," Naomi whispered, horrified by the admission. "Sometimes I resent my mom for dying and leaving me with everything. Sometimes I resent Destiny for needing so much. Sometimes I resent myself for not being enough." Tears were sliding down her cheeks now, but Naomi found she couldn't stop them. I love her, she said fiercely. I would die for Destiny. But Lucas, I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of carrying everyone and everything. I'm tired of being the person who never gets to fall apart. And that's when Lucas moved. He closed the space between them in 2 steps, his hands coming up to cradle her face as the first sob escaped her throat. His thumbs caught her tears, and Naomi found herself leaning into his touch like she'd been starved for it. Fall apart, he whispered against her hair. Right now, right here. I've got you. Naomi's knees went weak. She'd been holding everything together for so long that when offered the chance to finally break, her body gave out before her mind could protest. Lucas caught her weight effortlessly, his arms sliding around her waist as she collapsed against his chest. Her tears soaked his shirt, but he didn't seem to notice, just held her tighter on the rooftop of a city that glittered below them like broken promises. Everyone expects me to be indestructible, Naomi sobbed into his chest. People at work think I'm some kind of saint because I never complain. Destiny thinks I have everything figured out. Even Sarah thinks I'm this strong person who always knows what to do. I know, Lucas murmured into her hair. I know exactly how that feels. And that's when Naomi realized, he did. Lucas knew the crushing weight of impossible expectations. He knew what it felt like to be loved for what you could provide rather than who you were. He knew the loneliness of being needed but never of being seen. He didn't hurt me, Naomi heard herself say, the confession coming out before she could stop it. My father, I mean. But leaving was almost worse than staying would have been. He didn't abandon me, he abandoned both of us. Made my mom's disease worse because she had to figure out how to raise 2 kids alone. Made me old before I'd been young. Have you ever been angry at someone who never technically did anything wrong? Lucas's arms tightened around her. I understand that kind of anger, he said quietly. Sometimes I wonder, Naomi whispered against his chest, if I'm even capable of being loved for myself. Not for what I can do or provide or fix, but just for being Naomi. Look at me, Lucas said softly. When Naomi complied, pulling back just enough to meet his eyes, the expression on his face took her breath away. It wasn't pity or obligation or even just attraction. It was recognition. I see Naomi, he said quietly. I see the woman who makes me laugh with her terrible jokes. I see someone who cares so deeply it probably hurts every day. I see strength that doesn't need to be invincible to be beautiful. And Naomi. Yeah. I think maybe we're both trapped by roles we never chose. The intimate confession broke something open between them. Lucas's hand slipped from her waist to curl around the base of her neck, fingers threading through her hair. Naomi's hands found their way to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his shirt. The space between their faces narrowed gradually, measured in heartbeats rather than moments. Naomi could count his eyelashes in the starlight. Could see flecks of gold in eyes that looked impossibly deep. When their lips were close enough that Naomi could feel his breath against her mouth, she whispered, "Are we making a mistake?" "No," Lucas said immediately, his voice husky with emotion. "We're finally being honest." And then their mouths met, soft and searching and so full of everything neither had words for. The kiss was gentle at first, a question and an answer both. But when Naomi's fingers curled into his shirt and Lucas's grip on her waist tightened, something else took over. Desire. Raw and real and undeniable. Naomi felt herself pressing closer, her body recognizing what her mind might not be ready to acknowledge. Lucas responded instantly, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy from sensation and emotion and the impossible reality of being wanted. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Lucas kept his forehead pressed against hers. "Tell me this isn't real," he whispered. "I can't," Naomi admitted. "Because it is." Above them, Dubai glittered like shattered glass. Below them, the city hummed with life. But here on their private rooftop, suspended between sky and earth, Naomi and Lucas held each other in a moment that felt like sanctuary. "I've been alone for so long," Naomi whispered. "Me too," Lucas replied. "But maybe we don't have to be." And in the space between dreams and destiny, Naomi allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be. And in the space between dreams and destiny, Naomi allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning after their rooftop confession changed everything. Naomi woke to the sound of Lucas's phone ringing incessantly from somewhere deeper in the penthouse. The sun streamed through her windows that still felt like a luxury she didn't understand, and she reached automatically for her own phone to check the time. 12 missed calls from Destiny. 37 text messages. Her Instagram notifications were scrolling so fast Naomi couldn't even read them. "What the hell?" she muttered, tapping on her sister's most recent text first. The message made her blood freeze. "Sis, you need to call me immediately. Someone saw you with Lucas Voss in Dubai and the whole internet is crazy right now." ***. Naomi's thumb moved automatically to Instagram, and that's when her world tilted sideways. A blurry photo of her and Lucas from last night's cafe visit filled her screen. The caption read, "Who is Lucas Voss's new mystery woman spotted in Dubai?" The comments were a nightmare Naomi couldn't stop reading. "Another gold digger. How does he keep attracting these women? She looks pretty basic for a billionaire's taste. Probably from Dubai's escort scene. Another social climber." Naomi dropped the phone like it had burned her digits. "Lucas," she called out, her voice echoing through the penthouse's marble corridors. He appeared in seconds, already dressed and looking harried. "Naomi, about the press." "You knew." Naomi's voice went hollow. "You knew people were taking photos of us?" Lucas ran a hand through his hair, which Naomi realized was his tell for stress. "I saw the photographer at the cafe yesterday. But Naomi, it's just tabloids. These things blow over. Subscribe because this media storm is about to destroy their fragile new connection." Blow over. Naomi's laugh came out sharp and brittle. "Lucas, my sister is probably sitting at home reading comments that call me a prostitute. My coworkers are going to think I'm sleeping with patients' family members for money. How do things like this just blow over for people like me?" But here's where Lucas's expression turned defensive in a way Naomi hadn't seen before. "For people like you," he repeated, eyebrows furrowed. "Yes, Lucas. Regular people. Working people. People who don't have publicists or image consultants or lawyers on speed dial to make media storms magically disappear." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Naomi, you're not like other women I've been photographed with." The phrasing hit her like a slap. "Other women? There've been others." "Of course there have been others," Lucas said dismissively. "I'm a public figure." But Naomi, they were gold diggers. Naomi finished, her voice flat. "Users? People trying to get something from you." "Well, yes," Lucas admitted, clearly missing the trap he'd walked into. "But you're different." Naomi stared at him, and suddenly the conversation from their Cairo flight seemed like it had happened to different people entirely. Once again, Lucas was the powerful billionaire and she was, what exactly? "What am I, Lucas?" Naomi asked quietly. "What am I other than another woman who got caught in your orbit? Have you ever been treated like someone you're not?" But Lucas wasn't hearing her. He was pacing now, phone in hand, talking about damage control strategies that Naomi understood only vaguely. "We need to release a statement. My PR team can handle this. We'll frame it as..." "Frame it as what?" Naomi demanded. "A business meeting? A coincidence?" "Lucas, I'm not a prop in your public relations strategy." Lucas stopped pacing to look at her. "What do you want me to say? That we're dating? That you accidentally flew to Dubai with me, spent the night in my apartment, and now we're..." "Nothing," Naomi interrupted sharply. "We're nothing that requires explanation to strangers on the internet." The silence between them stretched tight with tension. Naomi could feel like humidity before a storm. Then Lucas's phone rang again. And when he answered, Naomi heard the word billionaire spoken in urgent tones. "Billionaire," Naomi repeated quietly when he'd hung up. "I knew you were wealthy, Lucas. But billionaire." Lucas set his phone down carefully. "Naomi, money is just $1 billion. Naomi's voice went flat with shock. "You're worth $1 billion. "Okay," Lucas admitted quietly. "More than that." Naomi felt something crack inside her chest. "How much more?" When Lucas told her, Naomi sat down on Lucas's expensive leather couch and tried very hard not to throw up. That wasn't just wealthy. That wasn't even millionaire-level money. That was empire-level wealth that Naomi couldn't conceptualize. That was money that could buy hospitals, cities, entire political campaigns. And suddenly everything felt different. Have you ever found out someone you trusted kept something massive from you? I asked you yesterday, Naomi said quietly, about your wealth. You said maybe. You said it casually like we were discussing restaurant prices. Lucas moved to sit beside her, but Naomi tensed when he reached for her hand. Naomi, I didn't lie, he said carefully. I just don't think about money the same way. Of course you don't, Naomi replied, pulling her hand away. You're so wealthy you don't have to think about money at all. Bills that are groceries or rent. Prom dresses for 17-year-old sisters. College tuition for futures you're terrified you can't provide. The anger in her voice surprised even Naomi. I've been honest about everything else, Lucas insisted. The responsibilities, the loneliness, the isolation. Naomi, those things are real. Are they? Naomi stood abruptly, putting distance between them. Because honestly, Lucas, everyone around here seems pretty devoted to making your life comfortable. Lucas's expression shifted to something defensive, a look Naomi was learning might be his default mode when he felt attacked. What do you mean? I mean your assistant brought you fresh coffee before you even asked this morning. I mean your chef prepared breakfast that would feed my family for a week. I mean everyone in this building treats you like royalty and you barely notice because this is just normal to you. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, and Naomi could see him processing her words. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of villain. I'm saying, Naomi replied carefully, that I don't know if you can really understand what it means to be powerless. To have every decision dictated by money you don't have. To wonder constantly whether you're good enough. Naomi, Lucas stood moving toward her, you know I care about you. Do I? Naomi's voice was whisper-soft, but it carried every ounce of their tension. Because Lucas, what happens when you stop finding me fascinating? When the novelty of dating a nurse wears off. When you realize that Naomi Brooks from Atlanta doesn't know which fork to use at formal dinners or how to navigate high society events. The question hung between them like smoke from a fire threatening to spread. Don't, Lucas said firmly. Don't sabotage whatever this is because you're scared. I'm not scared, Naomi lied reflexively. I'm realistic. Lucas, look at the internet. People are already assuming I'm using you for money. But you're not, Lucas insisted firmly. No, Naomi agreed quietly. I'm not. But here's the thing, Lucas. Today I learned that you're worth enough money to change the trajectory of thousands of lives. Tomorrow I'll fly home to a life that barely covers one. The implication crashed over them both like breaking waves. Are you saying money changes how you see me? Lucas asked quietly. Are you saying it doesn't? Naomi shot back. Subscribe because this confrontation is about to tear them apart completely. The silence stretched between them, heavy with truths neither wanted to voice. Naomi looked around Lucas's penthouse, the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors, the art that probably cost more than her entire apartment building, and she saw her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. She looked small and lost and impossibly out of place. I think, Naomi said finally, that maybe we come from worlds so different that they can't really coexist. That's an excuse, Lucas replied sharply. And it sounds like cowardice. The word hit Naomi like a physical blow. Cowardice. Fear, Lucas clarified. Fear of what might happen if you let yourself believe that connection doesn't have to fit some predetermined category. Naomi stared at him, surprised by the edge in his voice. Maybe, she said quietly, the fear is realistic. Maybe I'm afraid because I know how this story ends. How does it end? Lucas demanded. With me flying home alone, Naomi answered simply. And you forgetting Naomi Brooks ever existed. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge neither wanted to acknowledge was truth. Naomi picked up her phone, noting the endless notifications still streaming in, and realized that in this penthouse of luxury, surrounded by wealth she couldn't comprehend, she'd never felt more alone in her life. Maybe the media isn't wrong, Naomi said quietly. Maybe this whole thing is exactly what it looks like, a beautiful mistake that was never meant to last. And for the first time since she'd stepped onto the wrong plane, Naomi felt the full weight of being out of place in someone else's world. And for the first time since she'd stepped onto the wrong plane, Naomi felt the full weight of being out of place in someone else's world. The silence in Lucas's penthouse stretched for hours after their confrontation. Naomi hid in her guest suite, scrolling through mounting social media disasters, reading comment after comment that made her feel smaller with each click. Her phone buzzed constantly with worried texts from Destiny, confused calls from Sarah who'd heard about the Dubai scandal, and Instagram notifications tracking likes on photos she'd never agreed to have taken. When Lucas finally knocked on her door, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. "Naomi," his voice carried through the heavy wood door. "Can we talk?" Naomi stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the same face that had looked back at her from 1,000 hospital shifts, yet somehow completely unrecognizable now. Tired eyes, chapped lips from crying she hadn't even noticed, hair tangled from hours of restless tossing. She opened the door to find Lucas looking equally wrecked. His expensive shirt was wrinkled, his normally styled hair mussed, dark circles beneath eyes that held something Naomi hadn't seen before: desperation. "There's somewhere I need to take you," he said quietly. "Now." Naomi's voice came out hoarse from hours of silence. "Before you fly home tomorrow," Lucas replied. "Before we lose this chance completely." Subscribe to discover where Lucas is taking Naomi for their final evening together. Naomi wanted to resist. Every instinct told her to stay safely locked in this room, call the airline, pack her few belongings, and disappear back to Atlanta where she belonged. But something in Lucas's expression made her chest ache. "What if I don't want to go somewhere else with you?" Naomi asked, though her voice lacked conviction. "Then say no," Lucas said simply. "But Naomi, if this is truly our last night together, wouldn't you rather spend it somewhere beautiful than hiding in a guest bedroom?" The logic was infuriatingly sound. An hour later, Naomi found herself in another impossibly luxurious car, this one with reinforced windows and privacy screens that made the outside world disappear completely. She'd changed into a simple sundress Sarah had packed for their Miami trip, her only outfit that didn't scream nurse on work vacation. "Where are we going?" Naomi asked as Lucas drove with focused intensity through Dubai's endless highways. "The desert," Lucas replied. "Real Dubai." Real Dubai turned out to be nothing Naomi could have imagined. They drove for nearly 2 hours, passing oil derricks that looked like skeletal monuments in the sand, small communities where nomadic tents clustered around oasis wells, and finally a vast expanse of dunes that stretched toward infinity under a sky rapidly purpling with approaching night. When Lucas stopped the car and unpacked supplies, Naomi realized he'd planned this. Lanterns that glowed softly when lit, woven blankets thick enough to soften hard sand, a small cooler containing a picnic dinner wrapped in linen. But here's what caught Naomi's breath: the absolute silence. Have you ever been somewhere so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat? No traffic rumble from distant highways. No airplanes threading contrails across endless blue. No electronic hum of elevators or air conditioning or city energy. Just wind across millions of sand grains and their own breathing. "I come here when the world feels unbearable," Lucas said quietly, spreading blankets over sand that was still warm from the day's scorching heat. Naomi watched him work, the ritualistic precision with which he arranged everything, the careful attention to details that shouldn't matter if this was truly their last night. Something in his movement spoke of someone who'd done this many times before, sat alone in endless dunes trying to sort meaning from meaningless privilege. "When did you start escaping to desserts?" Naomi asked quietly. Lucas paused in his lantern arrangement. "After my grandmother died. When I realized I was living someone else's life." "So you run when things get hard?" Naomi's question was softer than she intended. "I used to," Lucas admitted, turning to face her. "Until I met someone who reminded me why fighting for the life you actually want might be worth staying." The implication hung between them like campfire smoke in the desert air. As the last sunlight faded and twilight painted the dunes in shades of lavender and rose, Lucas served dinner with hands that seemed uncharacteristically careful. Naomi recognized the care he'd taken with everything. Finger foods that wouldn't require utensils she didn't know how to navigate, wine bottles that came from sustainable vineyards Lucas had researched personally, simple conversation starters that didn't assume shared cultural knowledge. "This was expensive," Naomi observed quietly, holding up a wine glass that caught starlight in delicate crystal. "Everything about my life is expensive," Lucas replied. "But Naomi, here's what I realized today: I've never spent money on something I actually cared about." "What do you mean?" Lucas moved closer to her on the blanket. This dinner. Those lanterns. This night. Usually I'm investing in business ventures or charity donations or assets that appreciate. But today, I spent money on time. On possibility. On believing that maybe tonight doesn't have to be an ending. Have you ever wanted something so much you'd pay any price for one more chance? The vulnerability in his voice caught Naomi unprepared. Suddenly, she wasn't sitting across from billionaire Lucas Voss. She was sitting across from a man who just admitted he was terrified of losing her. Why does it matter? Naomi asked quietly. You'll find someone else. Someone who fits your world better. Because Naomi, Lucas's voice went raw with something she'd never heard from him before. What if I don't want someone who fits my world? What if I want someone who challenges it? The question hung in the desert silence like incense. This has been real, Lucas said quietly, moving even closer. Whatever happened between us, from the moment you stumbled onto my plane to right now, it's been real. And Naomi, I don't want this to end. Naomi's chest constricted painfully. Lucas. Stay, he interrupted softly. Stay with me. Not forever. Not even promise forever. Just, give us a chance to figure out what this could be. The plea in his voice was like nothing Naomi had expected to hear from someone who controlled empires. But here's where Naomi's resistance came from places she'd learned to trust. Her loyalty to destiny, her commitment to patients who depended on her, her understanding that dreams were dangerous fantasies that hurt you when reality inevitably crashed back down. Lucas, I can't stay, Naomi said quietly, though each word cost her something. What about destiny? What about my job? What about my entire life back home? What about your happiness? Lucas asked gently. What about letting someone who wants to love you actually try? Subscribe because Naomi is about to make the most difficult decision of her life. Naomi's eyes filled with tears she'd been fighting all day. You make me believe in something real again, she whispered. Then believe in us, Lucas urged, his hand finding hers across the sand. Naomi, you said your worlds are too different to coexist. But what if they're not? What if your world could include space for being loved? For being cared for? For occasionally being the one who gets taken care of instead of always providing care? The image Lucas painted was so foreign to Naomi's reality that it felt impossible. A life where she wasn't constantly managing crises, calculating debts, worrying about providing enough for everyone else. When I'm with you, Naomi admitted quietly, I forget how heavy everything feels. You make me forget that I'm not supposed to want things for myself. Then maybe, Lucas whispered, moving impossibly close, you're not supposed to forget. Maybe you're supposed to remember what wanting feels like. And that's when Naomi stopped resisting. When Lucas's mouth met hers in the desert darkness, the kiss was hotter than the sand beneath them, more desperate than any goodbye kiss had right to be. Naomi's fingers tangled in his hair as Lucas pulled her closer against him, igniting layers of desire that had been building since their first electric touch on the plane. This wasn't gentle anymore. This was two people who understood exactly what they were losing and couldn't quite let go. Naomi found herself pressed against Lucas's chest, his heartbeat rapidly beneath her palm, their breathing desperate and unified as stars ignited overhead like cosmic confetti. The desert wind carried sounds she'd never heard before, urgent whispers that might have been love declarations or might have been prayers to different gods. When Lucas whispered stay against her throat, Naomi felt the words sear into her skin like a brand. When Naomi gasped I can't, the sound carried across dunes like a surrender. But here's what happened in that moment of perfect chaos. Something cracked open inside Naomi that she'd locked away so long she'd forgotten it existed. Something that whispered possibilities instead of limitations. Something that called her brave instead of sensible. She pulled away first, though every cell in her body protested the separation. I can't, Naomi said again, her voice steadier this time despite tears streaming down her face. Not like this. Not because I'm scared. But because destiny deserves better than a sister who runs away from responsibility when things get hard. Lucas stared at her, his eyes reflecting starlight and something that might have been pride. You're not running away from responsibility, he said quietly. You're choosing between different kinds of responsibility. I'm choosing the safe choice, Naomi replied firmly. Maybe, Lucas acknowledged. But Naomi, safe isn't the same as right. As desert winds carried their words toward horizons they'd never reach, Naomi realized that her heart was breaking for two different lives, the one she'd return to destiny, and the one she'd walk away from forever. And in the space between stars and sand, she understood that some dreams hurt more when they're almost yours than when they never existed at all. And in the space between stars and sand, she understood that some dreams hurt more when they're almost yours than when they never existed at all. Morning came too early. Naomi had barely slept after their desert confession, watching Dubai's skyline glow outside her penthouse window like a persistent reminder that today she would leave behind everything she discovered about herself. The sun rose over buildings that had once seemed impossible, and Naomi realized they'd become familiar overnight. Packing felt like performing surgery on herself, folding clothes methodically while trying to pretend this wasn't goodbye to the person she'd allowed herself to become in Dubai. She examined each item Sarah had packed for their Miami trip, wondering if she'd ever look at these same clothing items in Atlanta without remembering how Lucas's eyes had lit up when he saw her wearing them. Her phone buzzed with airline notifications about baggage allowances and security requirements. Each alert felt like another nail in the coffin of possibility. "You're really going to do this," Naomi told her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "You're going to walk away from someone who makes you believe you deserve happiness." But destiny deserved someone reliable. Her patients deserved a nurse who didn't abandon her duty for romance. Her entire life in Atlanta deserved better than someone who'd run toward the first taste of luxury she'd ever experienced. Subscribe for episode 2 to see if Naomi actually boards that plane. When Naomi emerged from her room with her luggage, Lucas was nowhere to be found. The penthouse felt cavernous without his presence, and Naomi realized she'd been comforted by the sound of his footsteps on marble floors, the rustle of him moving through his morning routine, even their tense silence from yesterday's confrontation. A note lay on the kitchen counter where Lucas had left coffee steaming in French press glassware that probably cost more than Naomi's monthly grocery budget. "I'll ensure you get to the airport safely. Driver at 10 a.m. I understand your choice. The words felt like a punch to her stomach. As Naomi descended in Lucas's private elevator, she tried to categorize the sensation in her chest: loss, relief, regret, resolve. But nothing felt simple anymore. Nothing felt like the clean ending she'd convinced herself she needed. The driver was quiet and professional, like he'd been trained to ferry heartbroken women away from luxury apartments and back to regular lives. Naomi watched Dubai drift past the tinted windows and wondered if she'd ever see these streets again. But maybe that was the point. Maybe some experiences existed just to prove what was possible, not what was supposed to be permanent. Have you ever walked away from something incredible because it felt too big for your life? Dubai International Airport glittered around Naomi like a crystal palace she'd never belong in. She navigated the check-ins and security checkpoints with practiced efficiency, her nurses training for handling emergencies helping her move through customs on autopilot. Her boarding pass felt heavy in her hands when she collected it. Flight 441 to Atlanta. Gate 27. Seat 17C. Economy class next to strangers who'd never know that less than 72 hours ago, Naomi had been seated across from a billionaire on a private jet, watching Dubai's skyscrapers stretch toward clouds she'd never dreamed existed. When her phone rang in the terminal's echoing acoustics, Naomi knew without looking that it was Destiny. "Are you okay?" Destiny's young voice carried instant concern. "I've been reading all the horrible comments online, and I'm worried no one protected you from any of it." "I'm fine," Naomi replied automatically, finding an empty bench near her gate where she could have some privacy from the streams of travelers moving around her. "Liar," Destiny said softly. "Sis, your voice hasn't sounded like that since Mom died." The observation hit Naomi like a cold wind. She'd been trying to sound strong, professional, in control, all the things everyone expected Naomi Brooks to be. But Destiny heard the cracks. "I made the right choice," Naomi said firmly. "I'm coming home where I belong." "Home," Destiny repeated thoughtfully. "You mean back to working double shifts so I can go to college? Back to stress eating at 2 a.m. because bills won't die until you die? Back to pretending you're happy for my sake while you slowly disappear piece by piece?" The sharp description of Naomi's reality made tears spring to her eyes. "It's my responsibility." "Stop," Destiny interrupted firmly. "Stop saying responsibility like it's a life sentence. Naomi, you've carried us for years. Maybe it's okay to let someone carry you for a while." Have you ever had someone see through your excuses directly to your heart? But what about what you need? Naomi whispered into the phone, aware that other travelers were settling into seats around her gate. Yesterday, I calculated our college fund, Destiny said quietly. It's better than I expected. And Naomi, I've been researching nursing scholarships and financial aid, and there are options we never looked at because you've been doing everything alone. Naomi stared at her boarding pass, her vision blurring slightly. You've been doing research. I've been watching my sister kill herself trying to be perfect for everyone except herself, Destiny replied with startling wisdom for a 17-year-old. And yesterday when I saw you with Lucas Voss in that cafe photo, I realized something. You actually smiled like you were happy instead of like you were trying to convince everyone you were okay. The accuracy of Destina's observation made Naomi's chest constrict painfully. I'm supposed to be the one protecting you, Naomi whispered. You protect me by showing me that people deserve to be happy, Destiny insisted. Even when happiness comes in packages we didn't order. Naomi's tears fell openly now, and she didn't care that other passengers might be watching a grown woman cry in an airport terminal. What if I'm making a mistake? Naomi asked quietly. What if you're making the first brave choice you've made in years? Destiny countered. As Naomi listened to her sister's voice, wisdom that Naomi herself had somehow imparted without realizing it, she glanced up at the boarding announcements scrolling across departure screens around the terminal. Flight 441 to Atlanta would begin boarding in 15 minutes. Suddenly the gate area felt claustrophobic. Naomi's chest tightened, and she found herself unable to remain seated. I need to think, Naomi said abruptly. I'll call you before the flight. Make sure you're calling to tell me what you want, Destiny said firmly before hanging up. Not what you think you owe other people. Naomi practically marched away from her gate, needing space to escape the suffocating weight of duty versus desire pressing against her ribs like an actual physical presence. She had wandered into a quieter corridor of the terminal, far enough from crowds that Naomi could hear her own breathing echo against glass walls displaying Dubai's skyline where Lucas probably sat right now in his empty penthouse, respecting her choice to live a smaller life than the one he'd offered her. He wouldn't even argue with me, Naomi muttered to herself, leaning against a window that showed planes taxiing toward runways. He just accepted that I'm not brave enough to try. But even as she said the words, Naomi felt something crack open inside her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced when Lucas had kissed her in the desert, when she'd realized she could taste hope if she stopped insisting that dreams belong to other people. Subscribe because this moment is about to change everything. What if I'm not the person I've convinced myself I am? Naomi whispered to her reflection in the airport glass. What if the Naomi Brooks who'd accidentally boarded a billionaire's plane was the real Naomi? The one who deserved more than survival mode? The one who could learn to accept love without categorizing it as dangerous? Naomi. The voice echoed down the corridor like a thunderclap in the otherwise quiet space. Naomi turned slowly, certain her exhausted mind was hallucinating voices from her fantasies. But Lucas sprinted toward her, breathing heavily like he'd run through half the airport. His expensive shoes squeaked against polished floors as he pushed past airport announcements and moving walkways, dodging preoccupied travelers with the single-minded focus of someone chasing something that mattered more than polite social boundaries. Lucas, Naomi whispered when he reached her, disheveled and panting but with eyes that burned with something Naomi had never dared enough to name. Don't walk away, he gasped, still trying to catch his breath as he grabbed her hands urgently. Please don't get on that plane. Naomi stared at him, her mind racing while her heart hammered against her ribs fast enough that she wondered if she might faint standing upright. How did you, the security, you can't just. I paid for expedited processing, Lucas explained quickly. Airport security escorts for VIPs. Naomi, I've been sitting in the departure area watching passengers board every Atlanta-bound flight, trying to find you before you disappeared forever. Subscribe because Lucas is about to make the most honest plea of his life. Naomi's mouth dropped open. You've been here. Since your driver dropped you off, Lucas admitted. Naomi, I couldn't let you leave thinking I accepted this ending. But I chose this ending, Naomi said weakly. You chose safety, Lucas corrected gently. And Naomi, I'll meet you halfway. Just give me a chance to show you that love doesn't have to mean giving up who you are. It can mean becoming more of who you could be. The genuine desperation in his voice made tears stream down Naomi's face unchecked. I have responsibilities, Naomi whispered. And responsibilities can be shared, Lucas replied immediately. Naomi, I've never had someone see me for who I actually am instead of what I own. You made me remember that real connection exists. Don't walk away from something that rare. But what about my life? Naomi asked desperately. My sister? My job? Everything I'm leaving behind? What about everything you might gain? Lucas countered softly. Naomi, you don't have to choose between loving your sister and loving yourself. You don't have to choose between your career and romance. You don't have to choose between Atlanta and possibility. Have you ever been offered a bigger life than the one you'd convinced yourself you deserved? Naomi stared into Lucas's eyes, eyes that reflected hope she'd never seen directed toward herself before. I'm scared, Naomi admitted quietly. I know, Lucas replied, his thumb stroking her knuckles gently. But Naomi, I'm scared too. Scared of losing someone who makes me remember why I wanted to build things that mattered in the first place. The boarding announcement for Flight 441 echoed through the airport speakers, calling Naomi's name and seat number along with dozens of other passengers who were actually boarding the plane back to predictable lives. Naomi looked down at her boarding pass, the flimsy piece of paper that represented everything safe and familiar and small about her existence. Then she watched her own hand, as if observing someone else make the decision, lift the boarding pass high enough that she could see it clearly in her reflection against Dubai's skyline gleaming behind her in the airport window. And she dropped it into the nearest trash can. 2 more days, Naomi whispered, her voice trembling with emotion and possibility. Lucas's smile broke like sunrise across his face, joy so pure that Naomi realized she'd never seen him genuinely happy until this moment. That's all I'm asking for, Lucas said, his voice cracked with relief. 2 more days to convince you that maybe this doesn't have to be temporary. As they turned toward the main terminal together, Naomi glanced back one last time at the rubbish can where her boarding pass lay crumpled among gum wrappers and discarded coffee cups. The decision felt simultaneously terrifying and inevitable, like stepping off the wrong plane had been destiny disguised as chaos from the very beginning. Behind them, Dubai's skyline glowed golden in late afternoon light, buildings Naomi had once thought impossible now representing everything she discovered she deserved. And as Naomi Brooks walked away from her old life alongside Lucas Voss, she realized that sometimes the most terrifying thing about dreams wasn't that they'd never come true. Sometimes it was that they might.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.